Welcome back to the conversation. I'm David Shuster. The U.S. Department of Justice has begun a criminal grand jury investigation of former President Donald Trump connected to the January 6th insurrection and riot. There have been witnesses in recent days who have appeared before the grand jury. It appears as if prosecutors are trying to reconstruct some of the conversations that President Trump had with his aides, both in December 2020 and into January 2021. In addition, text messages and phone records have been subpoenaed and produced for the grand jury. And here to talk about all of this is Hugo Lowell. He is the Congressional Reporter for The Guardian and has been covering this investigation. Hugo, thanks for joining us. First of all, it does seem like there was so much anticipation about when would the Justice Department begin its investigation. Now it's clear that they have. How far along are they?
Well, I think we should kind of check in on the DOJ and exactly what they're doing. I mean, what we learned last week was that the Justice Department started asking top Trump administration officials, Mark Shaw and Greg Jacob, who are senior aides to the vice president, about their communications with Donald Trump with respect to overturning the election, the fake elector scheme, and obstructing the certification of Joe Biden's election win. That in and of itself, I think we should be careful, doesn't necessarily mean that the DOJ has opened a criminal investigation into Trump. But I think what we can conclude is that the DOJ is very much focused on Trump's role in January 6th. And so even though we might not say specifically that DOJ has opened a criminal investigation, the net effect of this is the same. And I think the fact that we are moving into the inner circle of the vice president's top aides means that this investigation is very much underway.
The Congressional Special Committee that has been investigating January 6th, for a while it looked as if they were going to be providing all of their materials to the Department of Justice, to transcripts. How does that relationship stand between the Congressional Committee and what the Department of Justice is seeking to do?
Oh, look, these are two separate investigations, and there has to be a firewall between Congress and DOJ. That's just how these investigations work. But I think, the fact that the Select Committee is now turning over around 20 transcripts, that's what the chairman, Benny Thompson, told reporters last week, that they're turning these transcripts over means that the Congressional Committee is now actively helping the Justice Department investigation. And I think this is really significant because it allows the DOJ to cross-reference what these witnesses in the grand jury investigations are telling them with what those same witnesses told the Select Committee. So if there's any sort of potential perjury going on, that would be where they can find that. But it also gives them some background and it gives them the context and the earlier work that the Select Committee has done, because they're focused on two very different things. The Select Committee for a very long time has been focused on Trump's role and the political role in January 6th, whereas the Justice Department has started from the bottom up. They've been going from the rioters and the people that stormed the Capitol and seeing if there are any connections back to Trump. So it sounds like this is now where we're going to triangulate and these two investigations run into each other.
And more than 700 people have been charged with various sort of crimes associated with the Department of Justice investigation. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's roughly correct. I mean, it's a moving target. And I think every day the FBI is identifying new people who stormed the Capitol. They're trying to see if previous indictments can be upgraded. I mean, today we saw the trial of Guy Reffitt, a rioter who stormed the Capitol, and the DOJ wanted to add new charges onto his original indictment. They wanted to add a terrorism enhancement. Now that didn't pass muster before a federal judge today, but the Justice Department is continuing to identify the people and charge people who stormed that Capitol.
There's been some debate within the January 6th Special Select Committee about whether at the end of their work, whether they would produce a criminal referral, some recommendations to the Department of Justice based on their findings, based on their testimony and hearings. Has that been resolved? Is there any sort of unity on the committee as far as what they will tell to the Justice Department at the end of this?
Look, so the debate about criminal referrals comes down to what can the committee actually do. There's no document, or there's no form they can download from the DOJ's website to say, yes, we are formally making a criminal referral to you guys. Please open a criminal investigation. This is not how this process works. Basically, what they do is they're going to collect all of the evidence, put it into a packet and send it over to DOJ and say, look, there's a cover letter. In the cover letter, they might say, we think there's potential crimes here committed by the president. Our recommendation is that you investigate. Now, whether or not the committee does that, we've already discussed that the DOJ is already investigating Trump's role in January 6th. So I think there is a debate still. It's definitely not resolved inside the Select Committee as to whether they want to actually make those statements in a cover letter. But certainly, I think either way, this all goes back to Trump, and the Select Committee's work can only bolster the Justice Department's investigation.
The Department of Justice, under its own guidelines, has an obligation when dealing with public officials to essentially open a dialogue before there are any sort of formal steps, presentations to a grand jury that are taken. Do you know if there's been any dialogue between the Department of Justice and Donald Trump or his lawyers regarding what they may be asking for, where this may be headed? Has there been any sort of exchanges of information, even pleasantries between DOJ and Donald Trump?
It's not entirely clear, and I think part of that is always going to be the former president is never going to want to announce he's under criminal investigation until he has no choice but to do so. And same goes for those lawyers. I think the important point to note with the lawyers is a lot of his top legal advisors, people like John Eastman, who authored the coup memo, people like Boris Epstein, who was instrumental in putting together the fake elector scheme. These guys are the targets, or it appears to be the targets of these grand jury investigations. You don't go and talk to the targets of an investigation until you have all the other evidence from all the other fact witnesses, and then you're almost ready to charge. And so I think that point is coming closer and closer. It doesn't sound like, though, that there's been any grand jury subpoenas to either the former president or his top lawyers, but there have been subpoenas to people right below them. And I think that's a very good indication of where the criminal investigation goes next.
There was once a time with the Department of Justice, when dealing with a public official who was seeking election or seeking re-election, that they would go to that public official and say, look, here's the indictment, here's the prosecution memo outlining all the charges we might bring against you. Let's cut a deal. And one of the options might be you either step down from office or don't run for re-election, and that will be part of the arrangement. There seems to be this sort of speculation across the United States that maybe the DOJ can cut a deal with Donald Trump and say, look, if you promise you will not run for re-election in 2024, we will soften up whatever indictment we might be considering of you. Is that realistic?
Not really, I don't think so. It's not typically how the DOJ operates. I mean, the DOJ, especially with this administration, especially with this Attorney General Merrick Garland, is really trying to stay out of politics. That'd be a very overt political move for DOJ to make, and I really don't see that happening. I think, typically when these sorts of plea deals are made, the way it works is that the department typically gets targets and witnesses to plead guilty first. And once they've pled guilty, then they say, okay, well, now that you've admitted your guilt, we will basically make sure that you have a lesser sentence through a deal with the prosecutor. That's really how it goes. It's not typically the case that they ask former or soon-to-be presidential candidates not to run for office.
I'm going to show my age here in this next question, and that is back in the IranContra investigation, 30 years ago, a number of the people who appeared before Congress, Oliver North and others, they were able to get out of their Department of Justice indictments or some of the charges because they were able to claim that it had been tainted, that the Department of Justice prosecution had been tainted by how high profile and public the congressional hearings had been. And so for a while, for many years, it seemed as if the Department of Justice would always go first in a criminal investigation, and Congress would defer and wait for the DOJ to finish up its investigation, or like in the Whitewater hearings, they would focus on areas that DOJ was not focused on. Is there some fear either in the Congressional Committee or perhaps even in the Department of Justice that things have been sort of so commingled again that anybody who might get indicted by the Department of Justice could essentially make that same defense and say, no, this is tainted by what Congress has already done?
I think there was a fear of that towards the start of the investigation. I think neither the members nor the Select Committee counsel that have been working on this investigation now believe that to be the case. I think, with previous investigations, like as you say, IranContra, it all got complicated a little bit because some of these witnesses were granted testimonial immunity by Congress, which DOJ found difficult to get around. This is not the case in this investigation. No one to date, as far as we are aware, has been offered testimonial immunity by Congress or by DOJ. And so there's no wrinkle here. The fact of the matter is when these cases get to the Justice Department and if they go to trial, they're going to have to impanel a grand jury. And what we saw in Bannon's contempt of Congress trial, this was really interesting. They were able pretty quickly, in fact, to impanel what both sides considered to be a fair grand jury that had only limited, if not no knowledge of the January 6 investigations or the January 6 hearings. So I think actually all of those fears are pretty much abated.
As far as the January 6 hearings are going in Congress, where are they going? I mean, they've taken something of a break now. It seemed like that perhaps they had put some incredible witnesses and testimony together. What's left? Where does the committee go now?
Yeah, so when I talk to members on the committee, the way they describe it to me is like, look, these hearings, these last 2 months have really been like Insurrection 101, a bit of a primer, a bit of an entry-level explanation for the American public to understand all the multifaceted schemes that the former president was running as he tried to return himself to office. The idea with the rest of the hearings is, the committee is going to issue an interim report at some point in September. We think it's going to be mid-September. And around the issuance of that report, the committee will hold a series of hearings examining what's in the report, as well as kind of new details that they have learned in the month of August when they're working pretty hard. In fact, one of the counsels told me that the month of August may be the most busy investigative month for them to date. And remember, this investigation's already been continuing for 11 months. So I think that's quite a statement. And then afterwards, they want to hold a final set of hearings around the issuance of the final report, which could bump really into the midterms. This could come November, December. So I think there's still quite a ways ahead for this committee to go.
And it sounds like a number of people have stepped forward based on the hearings and based on the testimony of some of the folks who decided to participate.
Yeah, look, I think Liz Cheney, the panel's vice chair, said at one of the hearings that the dam is beginning to break and that they are able to get through to Trump's aides, people close to the former president, people close to the aides of the former president. And I think this is really significant. I think if you see how Cassie Hutchinson testified, if you see how Sarah Matthews testified, these were two top-level Trump aides who braved the cameras and the lights and went before the committee to tell their story. And I think that really emboldened people. And they looked at Cassie Hutchinson and Sarah Matthews and say, if they can do that, well, I think we can do that as well. And so certainly there does seem to be an uptick in the number of witnesses coming for the committee.
And much awareness on the committee in terms of the November elections and the impact that they may have?
The only thing that they say is, look, if Trump's allies and Trump hadn't been trying to stymie the investigation for the first 4 months of it, when we started last year, we might already be done. So if these investigations run into the midterms and beyond, well, it's only Trump who has himself to blame.
Remarkable stuff. And we'll see. I mean, the Department of Justice, again, the headline is the Department of Justice has been taking some testimony and getting transcripts from the January 6th committee and has tried to start presenting some information to a grand jury. And where this leads, we will see what happens in the next couple of weeks and months. Hugo Lowell, he's a congressional reporter for The Guardian covering all of this. Hugo, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And that'll do it for this edition of The Conversation. On behalf of Asher Cofield, Gina Kim, Craig Lowry, and the entire team at the Young Turks, I'm David Shuster. Thanks for watching.